A father's ultimate sacrifice. John Carter was an ordinary man with an extraordinary love for his son. Living in a small town in Texas, he had spent his entire life working hard to provide for his only child, Ethan. John's wife had passed away when Ethan was just a baby, leaving him to take on both parental roles. Though life was tough, John never once complained. His world revolved around his son, and every decision he made was with Ethan's future in mind. Ethan was a bright, ambitious boy with dreams of becoming a doctor. He wanted to help people, just as his father had always helped him. However, the road to that dream was paved with obstacles. College tuition was expensive, and John's job as a construction worker barely covered their living expenses. Yet, John was determined. No sacrifice was too great when it came to his son's happiness and future. One day, John received devastating news. He was diagnosed with a terminal illness. The doctors gave him a few years at best. His first thought was not about himself but about Ethan. What would happen to his son? Who would support him? Who would guide him through life? The fear of leaving Ethan alone was more painful than the disease itself. John made a decision: he would do whatever it took to secure Ethan's future, even if it meant making the ultimate sacrifice. John spent his days working harder than ever, saving every penny he could. He picked up extra shifts, took on side jobs, and even sold some of his belongings to build a college fund for Ethan. His health deteriorated faster than expected, but he pushed through, ignoring the pain and exhaustion. One evening, Ethan found his father sitting on the porch, lost in thought. "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan asked, concern etched on his face. John forced a smile. "I'm fine, son. Just thinking about the future." "Your future?" Ethan frowned. "You always worry about me. Let me help. Maybe I can get a part-time job." John shook his head. "Your job is to study and chase your dreams. I'll take care of everything else." As months passed, John's illness worsened. He hid his suffering from Ethan, refusing to let his son see him weak. He continued working, pushing himself beyond his limits, until one day, his body gave out. He collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. Ethan was called to the emergency room. When he arrived, he saw his father lying on the hospital bed, looking frail but still smiling at him. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" Ethan choked back tears. John took his son's hand. "Because I needed you to focus on your dreams, not my pain. I've set everything up for you, Ethan. You will go to college, and you will become the doctor you always wanted to be. That's all that matters to me." Tears streamed down Ethan's face. "But I need you, Dad." John's grip tightened, his voice weak but firm. "I will always be with you, son. In everything you do, in every challenge you face, I'll be right there." A few weeks later, John passed away peacefully, leaving behind a fully paid college fund and a legacy of love and sacrifice. Ethan honored his father's wish, working tirelessly to achieve his dream. Years later, as a successful doctor, he dedicated his life to helping those in need, always remembering the man who had given up everything for him. And every time he saved a life, he whispered, "This one's for you, Dad." One evening, after a particularly exhausting shift at the hospital, Ethan sat by his office window, staring at the city lights. He had spent years dedicating himself to his work, but there was always an ache in his heart, a longing for the man who had shaped him into who he was. Just then, his phone rang. It was an emergency case. A young boy, no older than 10, had been in a severe accident. Ethan rushed to the operating room, his hands steady, his mind focused. The boy's condition was critical, but Ethan worked tirelessly, his father's words echoing in his mind, "You will go to college, and you will become the doctor you always wanted to be." Hours later, the surgery was a success. As Ethan stepped out, the boy's mother, eyes filled with tears, grabbed his hands. "Thank you, doctor. You saved my son. We owe you everything." Ethan smiled gently. "No, ma'am. I owe everything to someone else." He looked up at the sky and whispered, "This one's for you, Dad." And for the first time in years, he felt at peace. Years passed, and Ethan's reputation as a compassionate and skilled doctor grew. He started a foundation in his father's name, dedicated to helping children from low-income families receive medical care. The John Carter Foundation became a beacon of hope, providing scholarships, free medical treatments, and mentorship programs for aspiring young doctors. One evening, after a long day of volunteer work, Ethan sat in his office, flipping through an old photo album. His fingers traced over a worn picture of his father, standing beside him at his high school graduation. A soft smile formed on his lips. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A young medical student peeked in nervously. "Dr. Carter, I just wanted to say thank you. Your foundation made it possible for me to be here. I hope one day I can help others the way you do." Ethan felt a lump in his throat but managed to smile. "You will. Just remember, the greatest legacy isn't what we leave behind, it's the lives we touch." As the student left, Ethan leaned back in his chair, looking once more at the photo of his father. He whispered, "We did it, Dad. Your sacrifice wasn't in vain." And at that moment, he felt John's presence, strong, unwavering, and proud. The years continued to pass, and Ethan's foundation expanded, reaching children in need across the country. One day, an elderly woman arrived at his office, holding the hand of a frail young boy. "Doctor," she said softly, "this is my grandson. He needs help, but we have nothing." Ethan knelt beside the boy, his heart clenching at the sight of his malnourished frame. "You have everything you need," he said, holding the child's hand. "You have love. And that's enough for me to help." The grandmother broke into tears, and in that moment, Ethan saw a reflection of his father's kindness in himself. He understood now, his father had not only given him life but had taught him how to give it to others. As Ethan walked the child into the examination room, he looked up once more and whispered, "This one's for you, Dad." And he knew, somewhere beyond the sky, John Carter was smiling. Decades later, Ethan, now an old man, sat in the same rocking chair his father had once occupied. The city had changed, but his purpose had never wavered. As he watched the sunset, a young doctor approached him, eyes full of admiration. "Dr. Carter, I wanted to thank you. Your foundation gave me a chance at life." Ethan smiled, feeling the warmth of his father's love surround him. "Then go, and pass it on," he said. "Because love and sacrifice never fade." As the young doctor walked away, Ethan looked up at the sky one last time. "I'll see you soon, Dad." And somewhere beyond the clouds, John Carter was waiting.